welcome Karen Sanchez.
Good morning. It's great to be back here. I really like your sound guy. He just added my name there. Love that. Feel better now. So I just have the privilege of sharing a couple stories with you before Ricky comes to preach, and just fill you in on what God is doing in Thailand and some of the ministries that we're a part of. And before I do that, though, I just wanted to start by saying a big thank you to this church. Some of you might be new, but your church was one of the very first churches that came on board for us when we left in the year 2000. And you've been faithfully supporting us every month since then. We've had a trekker come from your church, and we've just been blessed by your prayers and by connecting with you when we come home. So thank you very much for your continued prayers and support. So I have a slide here of the first story I want to tell you, and that is some of the ministry that we do is with an orphanage that I started. It's called the Abundant Life Home. It's for children that are orphaned because of AIDS and HIV. And so we've been here in North America for about a month, and a couple weeks ago I got a phone call from one of our house moms, and she said, hey, there's a chance to take in 2 new kids, and their stories are pretty significant. So this little girl, her father was the only relative that she had, and he went into a bit of some type of a breakdown and ended up walking into a river and wanted to do a double suicide. So his wife had died of AIDS, and he was living with this girl. And so someone rushed into the river and literally plucked her out of the river and saved her life. And he was saved as well, and then unfortunately he had to go to jail. So she ended up at an emergency home, and when they found out that she was HIV positive, they didn't want her. So they called us, and they called our orphanage, and our house mom said, well, you're home, you're back in North America for 2 months, and we didn't know, and she doesn't have a birth certificate, and should we take her? And it was an amazing conversation that I had with Di. So she's the house mom of one of our girls' homes, and she is just graduating a whole group of girls. So normally we have 6 girls in a home, 6 children in a home, and she's been talking about how, like, wow, when this group gets through, I would love to kind of transition to be a social worker or work in the office. It's been a long road, 12 years of raising children with HIV, orphaned, lots of issues. And so she calls me and she's like, I feel like this is the exact case that we're supposed to take. And she said, are we open just to be having a convenient life? Are we open for exactly this type of child? And my question to her was, Di, you just have been talking about how excited you are to kind of move into that next phase of life. And here's 2 little ones. You'll see the next girl in a minute. And I just said to her, if you have enough love to give to these 2 girls, everything else God's going to provide. Funding for them and all the birth certificate work, which will be a huge headache. And she just, without a hesitation, just said, I have enough love. And so we made the decision to take her in. Her nickname was kind of a Buddhist name, and so Dai called me and said, can I change her name to Gift, which is Kong Kwan in Thai? And we just thought that was the appropriate name that God has given her as a gift to us, and that she herself is given the gift of coming into a loving family. And so the next picture, you'll see the next girl. Her name is Wan Mai, and her mom apparently was being hunted by the police, so she just kind of threw her in this bus stop here that you can see with a kind of a homeless man. And so after a couple days of taking care of her, he also called the authorities. They took her to the emergency shelter, found out about the HIV, and they figured she had scabies. So nobody, for 5 days in this emergency shelter, nobody bathed her, and nobody really wanted to touch her. So of course, we took her in and got her fixed up. You can show the next picture. Got her to some medical care. They had to shave her head, and she had all kinds of wounds all over her body. And what happened is so we quickly hired a day nanny to try and help Di take care of it with the 9 kids that she already has. Now we're putting 2 more in there. And this nanny that we hired, she's not a believer yet, but she helps us sometimes. She took one look at her and these 2 girls and just said, oh, I can't do this. I don't want to get scabies, and Di's own daughter is in the home who's 5, and she just said, I can't believe that you would let your daughter be close to these 2 girls. And so what God is doing in these 2 girls' life, which is beautiful, they've been getting medical care, they've been loved on, they're gaining weight. But the thing that's most remarkable to me is that this house mom, who is, she's been with us 12 years, and she's been a Christian 12 years. So she kind of came to Christ, and then God called her to this ministry. She is getting the concept of the kingdom of God, and that we don't need to live in a spirit of poverty, but that when God gives us a calling, he also provides provision. And so I am just amazed by her just going for it with these 2 little girls. So something you can pray for is just pray for Di as she's kind of navigating how to take in 2 new girls. The other amazing thing is that the younger girls in that home now are kind of stepping up and kind of acting as bigger sisters to these girls. So we were having a little bit of issues with a couple of the younger kids, feeling a little bit like maybe the youngest spoiled child, and all of a sudden they are totally taking care of these 2 kids. So I'm like, okay, God, you're creative. You're taking care of all the issues at one time. So pray for these 2 little girls. The next slide I wanted to share about was a lady named Ya, and she had a huge impact in my life. So often we get calls from women or social workers, and they want to give us their children, but the mom is still alive. And so our policy is that we try and take only truly orphaned children. And so we got a call about her 3 kids, and the social worker said, hey, she's in the hospital, she's got full-blown AIDS, full-blown TB, she's gonna probably pass away tonight. So we took her kids in. About 2 weeks later, she shows up at our doorstep, very, very sick, very sickly, and kind of wounds all over her arms, but she was alive. So she actually is the reason that I started a new ministry called Project Standing Strong. So what we've been doing is now, as we get these calls from usually women that have been trafficked into Pattaya and into the sex trade, we say, we won't take your child, but both of you or all of you can come, and we'll find you childcare and get you a job. And most of them end up getting saved and discipled. And so she came to us. Her story was that she grew up in Bangkok in a Muslim home. And she was the oldest of 6 children, and her parents, one parent died when she was 17, and one parent died when she was 18. And so because of that, she ended up in Pattaya, which is about an hour from us. It's the worst red light district in Thailand, and ended up going into prostitution to support her 5 younger siblings. And so fast forward a few years, she all of a sudden had 3 kids, she got really sick, and so the kids came to us, and all of a sudden she's in our world. So she shows up at our doorstep, and we took her in, kind of nursed her back to health. She accepted Christ, and then we went through about a year of just these ups and downs, right? Drug testing and running away, and then going and finding her and bringing her back. And finally, at the end of this year, I was headed home for a furlough a couple years ago, home, and I said, look, it costs 40 baht, which is about $1.30, to get to this Bible training back in Pattaya with YWAM called Tamar Ministries. If you can get there, they have a spot for you. And miracle of all miracles, she got herself on that bus, still totally addicted to drugs, and showed up at this YWAM ministry. And so about 3 months later, we came back from North America, and Ricky bought those beautiful flowers, and it was her graduation from this Bible school training. And we decided to surprise her and bring her 3 kids along. She hadn't seen them in months and months. And we walk into the room where they're having this graduation ceremony. And Ricky and I often talk about kind of, in 20 years in Thailand, we have lots of highs. And this moment was one of the highs for us. So we walk in there, we don't recognize her. She's put on probably 30 pounds in 3 months because she's finally off drugs and taking care of herself. And she comes over, gives us this big hug, is crying so hard that she doesn't recognize her kids behind us. And then her kids don't recognize her. They don't recognize her because they've remembered her as she was like many, many months ago. And so all of a sudden she sees her kids, and she falls to her knees and just starts this guttural wailing. And is hugging her kids. Her kids are like, I don't really know you. And she just could not believe that somebody would be kind enough, which to us it just makes sense, but to actually bring her kids to this little graduation, which was so meaningful for her. So she has gone on to get her hairdressing degree, and now she is a hairdresser right in the heart of Pattaya. And so every team that we bring there now for prayer walks and for intercession and just to kind of get people aware of the situation there, she comes, she meets with our team, she shares her story, and she's like, can I just stay with you and go hand out tracts and go praying with you as you go through the bars, because I love to do evangelism. So she's an amazing young woman. So if you can pray for her, her name is Ya. So the last story I have for you is the next slide, and this lady's name is Da, with the blonde hair there, and that's Ya in the middle. So she came to us. We got a phone call, and she had a baby, and she wanted to give to us. So we've gotten really tricky, and we just said, well, we won't take your baby, but you come for a couple months and just taste and see what we have to offer. And so her story is that her parents also died. She ended up on the streets as a prostitute when she was 14. And we met her at 32 this year, and she had been trafficked to Malaysia. And when she got there, she was kept in a room, her passport was taken, she was beaten. She ended up getting pregnant, and so she grabbed her passport, ran away, ran into a Thai Christian in Malaysia, which there's not that many Thai Christians to begin with. And this Thai Christian bought her a plane ticket back to Thailand with her baby. Then she went and she found a Christian home for unwed mothers who took her in through her pregnancy. And then she had the baby, and now the baby was about 6 weeks old. And then they referred her to us, another Christian agency who was ready to take her in and help her along the way. So she came to us. We were looking for a job. She wanted to be a baker. And after a couple weeks of being with us, she came to me and she said, I just have done an inventory of my whole life, and I realized that every point in my life where I've been at a crisis and I've needed kindness, it's always been Christians that have showed me kindness at every point along the way. And so she said, would you call all the church members and all the ALH community, and we had a team there from Abbotsford, a high school team, and I'm ready to accept Christ. So this Sunday morning, we were actually on our way to Cambodia. We had this big, beautiful time with her in one of the homes at ALH, and she gave her heart to Christ. It was beautiful. This team from Abbotsford sang these worship songs over her. She was weeping, and it was just this amazing time of her giving her life to Christ. Then the moment was kind of done, and we're getting packed up to go to Cambodia, and she goes, oh, by the way, I have never had a full night's sleep in my life. When I was born, my mom kind of consecrated me to this spirit, and the spirit won't let me sleep at night. You think your God, and we're like, actually, it's your God, could help me with that? And so, of course, that is just every missionary's dream. So we were able to just say, yes, our God has power over everything, over evil spirits, over the trauma of your past, whatever it is, your addictions. So we began to have her pray as a believer of about 5 minutes, and she just, in this simple way, just began to cast out this spirit that had been tormenting her. Well, and as she's praying, she just begins this kind of guttural wailing and screaming. And our little team from Abbotsford, they're putting their stuff together and they're just looking over there. And really what was happening was there was this intense struggle. This spirit did not want to leave. He'd had a place there for 32 years, or I don't know, whatever it is. And so there was this struggle going on, and all of a sudden she just stopped crying and she's like, oh, it's gone. And it was amazing. And she said, I just feel this incredible peace has just come over me. And so we prayed with her and through that, and all the Thai people were, praying over her in power. And what was amazing is that she said, the next day, she said, is the first time I've ever slept through the night. So she now is at Tamar Ministries, the same place with Ya, who was the person who helped me start Project Standing Strong. And now Ya is discipling her. So she's in Bible school now. Last little story. She had decided that she was going to still give up her baby for adoption. And so after this whole thing happened, about a week later, we drove to this orphanage, and then she was going to go to the Bible school. And so we get to the orphanage. It's really sad. This particular agency says if you give your child to us, then you don't get a 1-year kind of trial period. It's done. It's a final thing. So it's a very, very sad moment. We get there, and the social worker says, okay, where's the baby's birth certificate? And she goes, oh, Karen has it. I said, I don't have it. You're 32 years old. You're not a child. I thought you had it. So we're going back and forth. I never forget documents like that. It's an hour drive. So social worker goes, well, we can't take the baby. So I quickly call Tamar Ministries, the Bible school, and they're like, we have a nursery, tell her to bring the baby. So she is visibly relieved. We get in the car, we drive to this little Bible school to drop them off, and the leader of it, this Thai lady, kind of pulls me aside because the mom, this woman, was like, well, send the birth certificate tomorrow. You have to send it, express mail. And so she pulls me aside, the leader, and says, just wait about 5 days. I'm like, okay, but I promised her I'd do it tomorrow. She goes, no, just trust me. We have a nursery here, and I believe God's going to do something. So anyway, so I go home. I'm like, we're getting so sneaky on all levels now. But I go home, and I decide, okay, I'm not going to mail that thing. And she's calling me. I'm like, yeah, we're working on it. Sorry, And sure enough, the next Monday morning, which is about 4 days, Da calls me, and she goes, you know what? It is so loving here, and everyone's helping me so much. I've decided to keep my baby. So that is a miracle. Lots of exciting things happening, and please keep praying for us in Thailand. Thank you.
Whoa, there we go. Buenos dias. All right, and the last time I was here, I think it's been a few years, so we're going to practice our why. You guys remember that? Okay, we got actually some special guests that can help you. Bob and Chris Davis are here, and actually Bob is our regional team leader, so we're working together, and he's actually living in this state now. So if you still need a good preacher, he's always available. And so Bob and Chris are here. And then, I haven't seen you guys in a while, but we'll talk afterwards. His kid here that we really need to talk with is also here, and his wife Celeste, so that's good to see you guys. So we're going to practice this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to do it pretty quick. So you put your hands together when you why. And usually when we teach it, we try to go between here or here so it doesn't get all wild. You don't want to go out here. So it's just here to here. And then when you say your phrase that I'll teach you, you just kind of bend your head a little bit like that. Okay? So what you say, if you're a guy, we're going to do the formal one. We're going to say, Sawatdee krap. All right? So you get to say crap in church this morning. So try that. Sawatdee krap. Okay? Pretty good. And then the women are going to say, Sawadee ka. Try that. Sawadee ka. Okay, it's a tonal language, so I'll tell you what you really said afterwards. So you guys, now, here's the best part. You've got to turn. This happens every Sunday, everywhere we go. The younger person always, we really respect our elders. So if you have a little bit of gray hair, a lot of gray hair, we should go lower for those people like this. So the younger person always has to greet the older person first. So take like 30 seconds to the people around you, and you got to figure out who's older and younger, because that's the ones who's got to start it, and try to say your phrase. So try that in your area there. Okay. I was like, yeah, it was fun. Karen already did some of the thank yous. I personally want to say thank you also. We started this venture. If you can show the picture there, Matt. We've got a family picture here. Girls are actually growing up. Oh, not that picture yet. Not that one yet. Wrong picture. That's at the end. All right, there we go. So yeah, that's our family, and I'll just say that we love being family. 4 girls that God blessed us with. 2 of them, the hardest thing I think in missions is saying goodbye to family. That's the hardest. When people talk about sacrifice, all that stuff, there's other things you give up, but being away from family, extended family, that's for sure, for most missionaries, I would say that's the hardest thing about being overseas. But God continues to bless us, so I'll give you a quick rundown, because some of you do know our girls and you pray for them. If you don't have our card, they're out there. Take one, pray for them. This is always a big prayer for us. As parents, you want your kids to serve the Lord. So all of them love Jesus. They're going for it. Sierra got a job in Singapore, so she'll be only, when we meet in a beach, that beach you just saw, on holiday, she's only a 45-minute airplane ride away. and then we're an hour and 15 away. So we can get there within an hour and a half and see each other, as opposed to 16-hour plane rides, which we don't do that often, so we don't get to see the two older girls because they went off to college, and that by far was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, is say bye to our first girl. And now our second girl, Tasney, will go back to Kansas. She's got a basketball thing she does there, and she's a great student and loves the Lord. And then we'll take the two younger ones, what is called the baby, well, she's not a baby anymore, Ari is 15, and then McKenna, the next one. They go in order, and McKenna's 17. She'll be going for her senior year, so one more year, and then she's gone. And then we have Ari. We have 3 more years, and then empty nest, and that'll be a whole new realm for us that we don't even want to go to yet. And so pray for us. Pick up our card and pray. So thank you for that. I bring you greetings also from our churches. When we started there was Khmu tribal work that we were doing. So the first teams that ever went to Thailand back in 1992 started these Khmu church. So it was a tribal group in the north. They came from the Laos, and they were their history was they were slaves and basically pushed out from inland China areas, and then they went to, a lot of them were good farmers, so they went up to the northern part where there's a lot of fertile land in the mountains. And we met them, we didn't meet them, but other missionaries met them and started this work with the Khmu. That's grown now to be, there's a Changed Life Center there. Actually, Bob and Chris were living there for a while and helping that ministry. And so basically, in a nutshell, we train people there, and then we send them out all over Southeast Asia, for Khmu specifically. So that's what we started with. And then, so I can bring you greetings from the Khmu church, which has now expanded into Laos. And in Laos, we can say there's thousands that we've baptized there. And we're not going to mess it up. We're not sending any missionaries there. People like Bob and others go there to help the work and, excuse me, give project money and other things like that. But it's all done by nationals. It's really cool. Excuse me. The Thailand churches, a bunch of churches there. There's hundreds now that are calling Sunday morning worship is, let me get a water here. Calling Sunday morning church something that we are a big part of. Perfect, got a little good spot here for me. That's good. That was a good job by the craftsman there. So we have hundreds of believers meeting every Sunday to worship God together. And now the newest ventures are Burma. Churches are expanding there for part of our MB work, and also now we're talking and looking into Cambodia. So God's doing a bunch of really cool things all over Southeast Asia, and it's a great time to be there. So we're going to shift focuses now, and if you have your Bible, I want you to turn to Colossians. Turn to Colossians 3, and I'm just going to read it. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the background of what was happening here. Colossians 3, verse 12. Therefore, God's chosen ones, holy and love, put on heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, accepting one another and forgiving one another if anyone has a complaint against another. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so also you must forgive. Above all, put on love, the perfect bond of unity, and let the peace of the Messiah, to which you were also called in one body, control your hearts. Be thankful. Let the message about the Messiah dwell richly among you, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom and singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. And that's what we did this morning. Thank you to the worship team. And whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. We had the privilege of, first time actually for me to go to Europe. And so we flew to Rome. So if you show the next picture, Matt, this is where we think Paul wrote most of the epistles. We know that Paul wrote about 13 of them. There's debate among scholars if maybe Timothy helped in that, but regardless, we know he was in this prison called Marmontine. We think this is the last place he wrote many of the books. So Karen and I were there, and it's powerful when you think of Bible stories, and we know them to be true, but to actually go where they were written and to see where Paul walked, it just kind of invigorates everything, your faith, your journey. Maybe you're at a point where you're wondering, hey, God, are you real? And then you see this and you realize this is a real prison, and Paul was here. And it's not, I wouldn't call it a prison, I'd call it a dungeon. To go in, you had to go, they've created some steps, but by the end, from the time we got in to the time we're at the prison, it's about maybe 30 feet underground. The only way to get into the prison, we saw a hole at the roof, and they probably I don't think they gently got him down. I think they just kind of pushed him down, and you would fall probably 20 feet to get into your dungeon that's all concrete or rock. And so we were at 2 Timothy from there, and it just comes alive because you realize, wow, Paul was writing. And here's the part that I love. I love history, and church history is like some of the most history that's written that we know. It goes all the way back to the ancient world. We can read the Old Testament. But for this period, the Romans, the Pax Romana, they were in charge of everything. It spanned it all the way from Africa all the way into Europe. For almost 500 years, they dominated the ancient world. And so, when you realize right outside this prison is the Forum, one of the most civilized, they created all kinds of things there, democracy. They had buildings that would today still be buildings that people would go visit. We go visit them and it's just columns now. But back then, that was the only thing people would see that was like built up a city. We're talking 2,500 years ago. So if you go to the next picture, this is us on a little tour. That's the Colosseum. Now, I love stadiums. We were just talking with some of the brothers here about going to a minor league game. You guys have one of the most beautiful ballparks in all of baseball, Safeco Field. I've been there a bunch of times. This is the stadium. 2,000 years ago, they built this spectacle. They used 100,000 Jewish slaves that they brought in to build this. That's how powerful the Romans were. Took about 20 years, 70,000 seats, 50,000 for sure, we know, up to 70. You were divided into classes, so as long as you could afford the price of admission, you could come. But they divided into classes. So the poor would sit at the top, the emperor would sit right in the middle, in the box seats. And then you began to see all these animals. We know that they didn't have the same communication we have today. So they couldn't just go and say, what does a tiger look like? They would say, here are the tigers. And they'd parade them in. And people would come to watch just a parade of the tigers coming into the Colosseum. And everything was underground. And show the next picture. I was just fascinated with this. I was more fascinated because history has it that Christians were martyred there. And here's what was happening. If you went against the emperor, you were considered an enemy of the state. Our tour guide said, actually, to make it more so that you could understand it, you would be considered a terrorist if you went against the emperor. Now remember, they dominated for about 500 years. They built world-class cities. The aqueduct system in Rome, you can still drink fresh water from any fountain. Now, I didn't go to fountains and do that, but you have these cisterns everywhere. And at first you go, it can't be clean. And then you see all the tourists doing it. Cold drinking water. For 2,000 years they've had that. So way ahead of the times. This Colosseum must have been, it was still spectacular when you come up on it and you see it's a big stadium. And then you realize people were being martyred here. If you were a Christian, you were enemy of the state. If you went against the governor or government, you would be considered a terrorist. And then, as a Christian, you were saying, no, I'm not going to bow down to all these gods, but we have one God. And so you could be put in prison for that if you were outspoken about your faith. So then, when I think about Paul writing here, writing about the Christian life, He's putting his life in jeopardy. He's already in prison. This is at the end of his journey, and he was a Roman citizen, so they brought him up to Rome. He got on a boat, and they said, we're going to try you in Rome, and he's writing letters like this. Now, I don't know how it worked. I wish we knew how those letters got out, because I'm thinking, Paul, you're writing these letters against the Pax Romana, the Roman Empire, and somebody's got to read this. And wouldn't that mean right away you're going to be killed even faster? You don't probably even have to go to trial. They'll read your letters and say, you're not supposed to be talking about this. So we don't know exactly how the letters got out, but we know they did. And so we have a lot of the New Testament written in places like prison. So this place here would execute Christians. And the way they did that, it could be through gladiator fights, and you just had to go out and fight another guy, and the winner would live. Or animals. So they brought all these animals, many had never seen, and literally they let the animals loose and they carried a thread. And so imagine that. So the city of Colossae, it was actually located in Turkey, modern day Turkey today. And I think the main thing we need to know about that is just that when Paul wrote the letter to Epaphras, he sending the letter to him because they had met in Ephesus, which is about 100 miles away from Colossae. And he was just trying to tell him, hey, let's do it right with the churches. A lot of churches have been planted. Paul comes back. That's a big reason why he's coming back, is to help the churches. And some churches have kind of got some theology that's went this way, and so Paul comes back to help. So this letter was written to a fellow servant, Epaphras, and that's how we get the book of Colossians. So that's just a little bit of background, and then giving you some context of how it was written and in what setting. So I was just fascinated by that. I want to switch focuses now and share about what God is doing. Karen had some really cool stories, and we're going to finish off with some cool stories. So if you go through the slides, next slide. These are some of our girls at ALH. This is at a wedding, and I'm quickly because we're going to pray at the end of our service. And I don't know if the worship team is going to come back up, but we'll pray, and then if there's some closing remarks or worship time, we'll do that. So the first girl, Mon, she is currently at YWAM. She is School for the Arts in the North. Second girl, I want you to remember her face. Her name is Noon. Noon ran away about a month ago. And we need to pray. Because the stories Karen just shared, life for a young Thai girl that can't find work ends up in the sex trafficking trade. She's not in a good situation. We're worried for sure. We've had pictures given to us, prophetic pictures that say, I saw her, she was bloodied, but she wasn't dead. But Jesus had her in her arms. So we're praying if that means she needs to hit rock bottom before she figures it out, then let it be. Now you don't want that, but she's definitely not coming back yet. There is some communication with her. Some of the girls are calling, and her mother died, what Karen just mentioned. She called, so they have some communication, but she's not ready to come. As soon as she turned 18, she was a worship leader, and she was going to Bible school, and literally Satan just ripped her out, and she started making bad decisions, and she's not where she should be. So pray for Noon. We're going to have time to pray. I'll just share one more. Bing Bing. Bing Bing was known because I've shown the video here. If you weren't here, long story short, she was rescued from the streets. She'd been begging from the year 2 to 7 in Bangkok. Her mother was a prostitute, died of full-blown AIDS. Fast forward, Bing Bing's one of the smartest students in the state. We sent her to a private school. She excelled. And for a long time, she said she wanted to be a doctor. She met up with another doctor. The doctor said, I want to help this girl. So she's currently working at her clinic. We believe, if it's God's will, someday you're going to be calling her Dr. Bing. And she's such an evangelist. She said, someday I'd love to go to places like this and share my testimony. She would have probably ended up dead on the streets, because that's the life that when you're that young and you start in that industry, that's where you're headed. So that's Bing Bing. Go to the next slide. That's just a picture of the Abundant Life home. So we built 5 homes like that in the background, and currently we have about 25 kids on campus. There's 3 different stages. The second stage, that's the first stage, they live on campus. The second stage, we're still helping them. They're around. They've turned 18, and so they're hopefully like your kids. You say, hey, it's been great. Now go get a job. And that's what we help for our kids. We want to help them with more training. That might be college, it might be technical work, but something where they go, get a job, go to school. So that's what's happening. Then the third stage is kids that we've helped over the years that we might still have some contact, some we don't. So if you take that total number, it's about 80 kids over the 12 years that we've helped. Go to the next slide. They're all Warrior fans, in case you didn't know. Like, this just happens when, when I'm a big Warrior fan, but that's for another time. But so, go to the next slide. These are called the Wonder Boys. God gave us these 5 boys. And today, here's how they look, 12 years later. Next slide. That's the boys. I'll just tell you a few. Mac, your bottom left, he's just graduated with an international degree, all in English, in our town. And his dream would be someday as a Christian to own a hotel and to help people and give good deals to Christians and then make some money out of that. June in the back, the tall guy to your right, in the back, he's in Bible school right now and loves to go into full-time ministry. Dow, far right, he had a kid, married now, and all of them are still attending church. Most of them are in our MB churches. Some of them moved away and are still serving God. We keep in good contact with them. So it's pretty cool to see the next generation now. And I'll just add, June in the back, you guys heard world news was happening this last, with Thailand, was happening with the kids that were trapped in the cave. So he was in Bible school, he was praying, and he felt like God said, you need to go up there and be a part of the prayer and the worship. So him and one of our girls from the orphanage, also studying in the north at a Bible school, they just got in a bus and then went up there and prayed. And God is starting to raise up this next generation of leaders. And he's using kids like this who in Thai society would have been the throwaways of Thai society. When you're born with AIDS, no parent, and a reincarnation thinking, religious thinking, that means you're at the lowest of the totem pole, the very bottom. And they used to even say, why are you messing with their karma? Because maybe they would have came back to something better. And we would have the privilege of saying, actually, here's the way God works. It's a whole new mindset for Thais. Is God gives us one chance in this life, and it's eternity. And we're going to give them the best chance here with Christian values, the love of Jesus, and we know there'll be an eternity with God. So it's a whole new for them. It just doesn't make sense, but God is using these kids to draw others now to himself. Because they are saying, if you can take care of these kids like that, we don't even want to take care of them like that, because we almost think it's a waste of time, because you're messing with their karma. And they're the lowest of the low. So God says, no, they're my children. They're heirs to the throne. And I'm going to take care of them. Go to the next slide. That's the 3 kids at Bible school right now. So you got Pat in the bottom. Karen actually was taking them first time on an airplane and taking them up to the north. Pong is the second boy, and then June is the guy I told you wants to go into full-time ministry. The last story is about Pong. So Pong, the young man in the middle, he came home from Bible school. He's having a tough time. He wasn't sharing a lot with us, but he basically said, he prayed to God on his own, and he said, Lord, I know you're real. I've done too much in my life not to believe that. So I know you're real. I just don't feel you. And we've had him for 10 years, and he's been baptized. He's a really good guitarist. He's been on a worship team. And he just goes, but I just don't feel it. And here I'm going back to Bible school, and everybody thinks I'm this great Christian, and I don't even feel like a Christian. Maybe there's times where we feel like that in our lives. So I hope this story encourages you. So he just said, and Lord, why did I have to be born with HIV? Why can't I be just like the regular kids? It would be really cool if you would heal me. He didn't tell any of us that. His next blood count, we do 2 blood checkups or checkups, physical checkups, and they always look at their blood, see how they're doing, make sure their counts are high, so we're not into any problem zones. The doctor says, I don't know what you're doing, but he no longer has HIV. I know his file. Like the files they keep are thick files because since he was a baby, he's had HIV. So the doctor's not a believer, and he wants to right away medically try to figure it out. He says, but I've never seen this. By the way, that's our third child that we can say that has been freed of HIV. Now in the past, I used to right away go to the negative side. Okay, God, you got 3, but we got 30 something at one point. Right? Don't we do that? And God said, Ricky, focus on what I'm doing here. You're not going to figure it all out, but stay here and celebrate that. So I've decided to do that. And kids will ask questions, and we'll deal with that, and why some, not the others. We'll deal with that, but we're celebrating that God has healed Pong of HIV. No longer takes medication. You have to know they take medication at 7 in the morning and at 7 at night, every day for the rest of their lives if they have HIV, so that it doesn't turn into full-blown AIDS. A common cold could kill somebody because your body's working so hard to fight off this virus, and so something else could take you out. So you always have to be careful, even with a common cold. You got to be on top of it. So Pong is no longer taking any medicine and loves Jesus, and he's thankful that Jesus has healed him. We're going to show you a quick video here, and then we're going to close with a challenge. So we have a video here, and this is just church planting 101. Sometimes you think, I could never do that. Go halfway around the world and start a church. What do you even do? Well, I had the same questions when I went on the mission field. People who know me personally know that one of my thorns has been Thai language. It's hard language. I got enough to communicate, joke around, and talk with people. I've even worked a little bit on a sermon, but it's hard. If it was Spanish, like you said, Peru is sounding pretty good right now. But, hey, it keeps me on my knees, keeps me trusting God. And so, this video shows you what it means to church plant. You kind of get a group, you share Christ with people, and then a little group forms, and that becomes the start of a church. So this is Zion Church, our latest church. This is church number 4 in our area, and just wanted you to see this 1-minute video. Zion Church is one of the newest church plant in our area, and again, just loving people. And I hope that can relate and translate to right here in Ferndale, because really, the gospel is pretty simple. We love people. This passage here talks about forgiving one another, putting on heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, accepting one another, forgiving one another. So actually, this was written to the church. But we can take this and say, how do we love our neighbor? I love the church buildings that when you walk out of the main door, some sanctuaries, it's all one door, and you see a sign that says, now entering the mission field. And sometimes we forget that. So practically, here's the challenge. Forgive each other and keep short accounts. Maybe here in this service, there's people who might have had some conflict in the past, and it's put a little wedge in there, and Satan can get in there really quickly, and that wedge becomes like a dividing river sometimes. I mean, we went to places in our teams that are going to places called Building Leaders for Peace. They go to places like Iraq, Turkey, where tribal groups have started, family groups that now have become wars against one another. And we're sending teams now to be peacemakers there. As Anabaptists, that's kind of our background, it's kind of our specialty. So we're sending teams there. And maybe you've heard about those. And so, forgive one another, keep short accounts, loving one another. Those are basic Christian principles that Paul's talking about here. So maybe in this service, there's some divisions. I don't know. Usually all churches have them, so I guess I can say I do know. But maybe it's time to say, humble ourselves and say, hey, I'm sorry. That's divided us for way too long. We're believers. If we're going to make a difference out there and we can't get along in here, it's not going to happen. See, what's happening at ALH is nothing magical. We're loving on kids that were throwaways of Thai society. The Thai people are taking notice and saying, I want to be a part of that community. Because if they can love the unlovable, wow, I want that. There must be a God. So maybe people need to see that in our lives. Maybe there's family members, and we can keep going, workers, people that you work with, co-workers, that you've had some beef with and you've never talked about it. So as we pray, I want you to just ask the Lord, Lord, is there anybody? And if something comes up, just take a note of it. And what we usually do, if it comes up tomorrow again, maybe God is saying something there. Maybe today it'll be so clear. I'm going to go to that person today and just start the conversation. And maybe it's us, even though we were wrong, it's us to go to them and say, hey, it's been too long. Let's forgive each other. But we got to start that. On a bigger level, as we go out, we can be missionaries. As we go out of here, you're entering the mission field. But some of you might be saying, I need a little more. And that might be doing the next trip. It might be Thailand, it might be other places. I always like picking up the bulletin and what the church is involved with. Maybe it's helping out in the community, working with street people here. There are people everywhere who have needs. And so maybe it's getting more involved. We call it local, national, and global. So you start local and then national, and then we're doing the global stuff. But there's always some people that need to just know that they're loved. So we're going to close like this. This is going to be a little different. I think I've done it in this church, so maybe you're experts now. We call it Thai prayer, Thai style. And so we're going to get up. Karen has used this a lot. It actually comes from a really good friend of ours. He's the president of Mennonite World Conference, named Cesar Garcia. He's actually writing a book on this about having our Mentecostal selves come out. And here's what that means. When you pray, you're going to make Bob and Chris and myself and Karen and Phil even feel really good, because when we pray in Thailand, we pray in power. And that just means you're going to pray a little bit louder. You're going to all pray at the same time. And I'm going to make it really simple. First thing, the practical part. Pray if there's anything that's been dividing you and someone else, pray that God would give you that person or family or whatever. The second thing, I want you to pray for Noon. We need her back. Lord, bring her home. Lord, we need her back. And she's a believer. It's in her heart. She knows Jesus. Bring her back. And then the third thing, hey, maybe God is calling us to maybe jump out and take a risk and maybe do a mission trip, maybe get involved with something the church is doing that you thought, I don't have enough time. Whatever the excuses were, maybe God is asking us, no, I want you to get more involved, whether it's a mission trip or whether it's a mission trip right here in Ferndale. So can we do those three things? And then I'm actually going to ask Bob. This guy is like a pastor. I'm going to ask Bob to come up here and close our time. So the way it works is I want you to pray out loud. We're a little bit over time, but that's okay because God moves. And Bob, I want you to come up here and then close us off. Can we do that? So stretch out your hand if you want and pray for those three things. Anything else God lays on your heart. And it's going to be a little chaotic, but I need you to be loud and I need you to just pray out. Okay? And then Bob, if you come up here and close this. And Bob's the closer. So as it kind of dies down, Bob finishes it. Okay? All right, let's pray. And thank you for having us. 1, 2, 3, go.